In the context of the 2020 National Electrical Code, specifically concerning the electrical requirements for indoor therapeutic whirlpools, the primary focus is on safety and accessibility. When installing a 208/120 volts power supply for such a whirlpool, there isn't a clearly defined minimum distance mandated for the placement of the disconnect switch relative to the whirlpool itself. However, Article 680.22b of the NEC provides critical guidance. This section emphasizes that the disconnect switch must be both readily accessible and within sight of the whirlpool. Readily accessible means that the disconnect can be easily reached without obstruction. This implies that the location of the disconnect shouldn't be behind locked doors, in high or hard-to-reach places, or obstructed by furniture or other equipment. The intent is to allow quick and easy access to the disconnect in case of an emergency or for maintenance purposes. The requirement that the disconnect be within sight from the whirlpool means that a person standing at the whirlpool should be able to see the disconnect switch. This is intended to ensure that someone working on or using the whirlpool can quickly de-energize the circuit if necessary. There should be a clear line of sight between the whirlpool and the disconnect, without any intervening walls or obstructions that would block the view. While the NEC doesn't specify a minimum distance, the within sight requirement inherently implies a reasonable proximity. The distance should be short enough that the disconnect is easily visible and identifiable. In practical terms, this often means placing the disconnect switch on a nearby wall within the same room or area as the whirlpool. However, the exact placement will depend on the specific layout of the room and any potential obstructions. It's important to note that although the NEC doesn't mandate a minimum distance, local codes or regulations might impose additional requirements. These local codes could specify a minimum distance or other restrictions on the placement of the disconnect. Therefore, it's crucial to consult with a local electrical inspector or building department to ensure compliance with all applicable regulations. In addition to the requirements of Article 680.22b, there are other relevant sections of Article 680 that should be considered when installing electrical equipment for a whirlpool. These sections address issues such as bonding, grounding, and the use of ground fault circuit interrupters or GFCIs. Bonding refers to the practice of connecting all metal parts of the whirlpool and its associated electrical equipment to create a common electrical potential. This helps to minimize the risk of electric shock by ensuring that there are no voltage differences between different metal parts. Grounding involves connecting the electrical system to the earth, providing a path for fault current to flow back to the source. This helps to trip the circuit breaker or fuse in the event of a ground fault, further reducing the risk of electric shock. GFCIs are designed to detect small amounts of current leakage to ground and to quickly de-energize the circuit. They are required for outlets and equipment located near water, such as those used for whirlpools. When selecting a disconnect switch for a whirlpool, it's important to choose one that is appropriately rated for the voltage and current requirements of the whirlpool. The disconnect should also be suitable for the environment in which it will be installed. For example, if the whirlpool is located in a damp or humid environment, the disconnect should be rated for wet locations. The installation of the disconnect switch should be performed by a qualified electrician who is familiar with the NEC and local codes. The electrician should ensure that the disconnect is properly wired and grounded, and that it is installed in accordance with all applicable regulations. After the installation is complete, the electrician should test the disconnect to ensure that it is functioning properly. This includes verifying that the disconnect is able to de-energize the circuit and that the GFCI is functioning correctly. In summary, while the 2020 NEC doesn't specify a minimum distance for the disconnect switch from an indoor therapeutic whirlpool, it does require that the disconnect be readily accessible and within sight of the whirlpool. Compliance with this requirement, along with other applicable sections of Article 680, is essential for ensuring the safety of those using or working on the whirlpool. Always consult with local authorities and a qualified electrician to ensure that the installation meets all applicable codes and regulations. It is also good practice to ensure all wiring is up to code. This may include using the correct size conductors according to NEC Table 310.16, proper overcurrent protection, and the integrity of the grounding and bonding system. Furthermore, ensure that all electrical components used, such as the disconnect switch itself, are listed and labeled by a recognized testing laboratory. This listing indicates that the equipment has been tested and meets the applicable safety standards. When considering the location of the disconnect, also think about the potential for future modifications or additions to the whirlpool or its surrounding area. Leave enough space around the disconnect to allow for easy access and maintenance. Avoid placing the disconnect in a location where it could be easily blocked or obstructed in the future. Periodic inspections of the electrical system for the whirlpool are also recommended. These inspections can help to identify any potential problems such as loose connections, damaged wiring, or malfunctioning components. Addressing these problems promptly can help to prevent electrical hazards and ensure the continued safe operation of the whirlpool. Remember that electrical codes and regulations are constantly evolving. It's important to stay up to date on the latest changes to the NEC and local codes. This can be achieved by attending training courses, reading industry publications, and consulting with electrical experts. When working with electricity, always exercise caution and follow safe work practices. Energize the circuit before performing any work on the electrical system. Use appropriate personal protective equipment, such as insulated gloves and safety glasses. If you are not qualified to perform electrical work, hire a licensed electrician. Finally, remember that the information provided here is for general guidance only and should not be considered a substitute for professional electrical advice. Always consult with a qualified electrician and local authorities to ensure that your electrical installation meets all applicable codes and regulations. Ignoring electrical codes can result in potentially dangerous outcomes, including electrical shocks and fires. It is critically important to respect the power of electricity and ensure all aspects of your installations meet code. When determining the within-sight aspect of 680.22b, consider any possible future obstructions. For example, if plants are nearby, could they grow to obstruct the view of the disconnect? Could equipment be moved into a position that blocks the view? The intent is a permanent, clear, unobstructed view of the disconnect. Think about worst-case scenarios, and if they are reasonably foreseeable, take steps to avoid them. The readily accessible requirement also has some nuance. Consider someone with limited mobility. Would they be able to access the disconnect quickly in an emergency? Ensure the height of the disconnect is reasonable for a wide variety of people. Never install a disconnect behind something that would need to be moved in order to access the disconnect. The readily accessible and within-sight requirements work together to maximize safety. This makes it easy to energize the whirlpool in the event of an emergency, and allows workers to easily and safely perform maintenance. When performing maintenance, always verify the circuit is de-energized with a meter prior to touching any electrical components. When selecting the physical location of the disconnect, keep in mind the environment. Ensure the location is dry and free from excessive moisture. Avoid locations where the disconnect could be splashed with water or exposed to corrosive chemicals. Over time, moisture and corrosive chemicals can damage the disconnect and create a safety hazard. The disconnect should be mounted securely to a stable surface. It should be installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions and all applicable codes. The wiring to the disconnect should be properly supported and protected from damage. Use appropriate strain relief fittings to prevent stress on the connections. Double-check all connections to ensure they are tight. Loose connections can cause overheating and create a fire hazard. Label the disconnect clearly so that it is easily identifiable. The label should indicate what the disconnect controls, such as whirlpool disconnect. Consider using a label that is resistant to moisture and chemicals. After installation, test the disconnect to ensure that it is working properly. This includes verifying that it disconnects all ungrounded conductors to the whirlpool. Document the installation. Keep a record of the disconnect's location, rating, and any other relevant information. This information will be helpful for future maintenance and troubleshooting. Inform the owner or operator of the whirlpool about the location and operation of the disconnect. Make sure they understand how to use it in an emergency. The disconnect is a critical safety device, and it is important that everyone knows how to use it properly. Regularly inspect the disconnect for any signs of damage or wear. If you find any problems, have them repaired immediately by a qualified electrician. A damaged disconnect can be a serious safety hazard. Consider the placement of the disconnect relative to other electrical equipment in the area. Maintain adequate clearances around the disconnect to allow for safe access and maintenance. Avoid placing the disconnect in a location where it could be easily damaged by other equipment. Think about the potential for future changes to the layout of the room. Will the disconnect still be readily accessible and within sight of the whirlpool if the room is reconfigured? Plan ahead to avoid potential problems in the future. The goal is to ensure that the disconnect is always readily accessible and within sight of the whirlpool, regardless of any changes to the surrounding environment. The disconnect should be easily accessible for inspection and maintenance. Ensure there is sufficient space around the disconnect to allow for safe and convenient access. The disconnect should be protected from physical damage. Avoid placing it in a location where it could be easily hit or bumped. The disconnect should be installed in a manner that prevents unauthorized access. Consider using a lockable disconnect to prevent tampering. The disconnect should be selected and installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. Follow all recommendations and guidelines provided by the manufacturer. The disconnect should be properly grounded. Ensure that the grounding conductor is properly sized and connected. The disconnect should be tested regularly to ensure that it is functioning properly. Perform periodic inspections and tests to verify its operation. Maintain a record of all inspections and tests. Keep a log of all maintenance and repairs performed on the disconnect. The disconnect should be replaced if it is damaged or worn. Replace the disconnect with a new one that is of the same type and rating. The disconnect should be installed in a location that is easily visible from all areas of the whirlpool. Ensure that the disconnect is visible from all angles and perspectives. Consider the potential for glare from sunlight or other light sources. Avoid placing the disconnect in a location where it could be obscured by glare. The disconnect should be installed in a location that is free from vibration. Avoid placing it in a location where it could be subjected to excessive vibration. If vibration is unavoidable, use vibration dampening mounts. The disconnect should be installed in a location that is protected from extreme temperatures. Avoid placing it in a location where it could be subjected to excessive heat or cold. The disconnect should be installed in a location that is protected from dust and dirt. Avoid placing it in a location where it could be exposed to excessive dust or dirt. The disconnect should be installed in a location that is protected from insects and rodents. Avoid placing it in a location where it could be easily accessed by insects or rodents. The disconnect should be installed in a location that is protected from corrosive substances. Avoid placing it in a location where it could be exposed to corrosive chemicals or fumes. The disconnect should be installed in a location that is protected from physical abuse. Avoid placing it in a location where it could be easily vandalized or damaged. The disconnect should be installed in a location that is in compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. Verify that the installation meets all requirements of the NEC and local codes. The disconnect should be installed by a qualified electrician. Hire a licensed electrician to perform the installation. The disconnect should be inspected and approved by the local electrical inspector. Obtain the necessary permits and inspections. Keep the disconnect clean and free from debris. Regularly clean the disconnect to prevent the buildup of dust, dirt, or other debris. Train all personnel on the proper operation of the disconnect. Provide training to all the employees on how to use the disconnect in an emergency. Post clear and concise instructions on the operation of the disconnect. Display instructions near the disconnect to provide guidance to users. The disconnect should be a reliable and durable device. Choose a high-quality disconnect that is designed for long-term use. The disconnect should be easy to operate and maintain. Select a disconnect that is simple to use and easy to maintain. The disconnect should be a safe and effective means of disconnecting power to the whirlpool. Ensure that the disconnect provides a safe and reliable means of de-energizing the equipment. The disconnect should be an integral part of the overall electrical system for the whirlpool. Integrate the disconnect into the overall design and operation of the electrical system. The disconnect should be an essential component of the safety plan for the whirlpool. Include the disconnect in the emergency procedures for the facility. The disconnect should be a valuable asset to the operation of the whirlpool. Use the disconnect to ensure the safe and reliable operation of the equipment. The goal is to install a disconnect that is safe, reliable, and easy to use. Follow these guidelines to ensure that the disconnect meets all requirements and provides a valuable service.